Hello, everybody. I am Lois Hollis, and today I am moderator to the talk on shame and guilt. And we called it Confronting Shame and Guilt because we do not want it in our lives. We have 4 experts talking today, and luckily each one has a part of the shame guilt scenario. And as you know, we could have 4 more and it still would not be saturated. However, we're going to begin with Monica. Monica, you're on.
Hello, everyone. I mean, it's kind of funny that I can say like shame and guilt is my jam, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a founder of the Revelation Project and the Revelation Project podcast. And my work in the world is all about disrupting the trance of unworthiness and helping women remember the truth of who we are. Kind of the way that I look at it is kind of before the world got its hands on us, right? And taught us all these ways to be in shame and guilt. And that's a burden that's actually not ours. That doesn't belong to us. And so I'm really thrilled to be having this conversation today to really liberate all of us, because I think it is a practice and it's something that we consistently have to remember over and over again. So I'm going to hand it over to Pollyanna.
Monica, can you tell us your website, please, first?
Yes, you can go to jointherevelation.com. And I also have a podcast, and it's called The Revelation Project Podcast.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. You're next.
Monica. Thank you. I'm Pollyanna Laura, and I am actually a litigation attorney in Los Angeles, and now I am transitioning into...
You just went on mute, Pollyanna.
Right, because I'm hearing the echo.
Ah.
Okay.
So I'll get through this quick because I'm hearing my own echo. So okay. I am now working with working mothers, helping them to handle time and stress, and built into that is the shame and guilt, because a lot of moms deal with shame and guilt and they don't want to ask for help, or they don't believe in self-care because that's a shameful thing. And they feel guilty putting their needs ahead of their children because society has imposed these requirements, if you will, or these stereotypes of what mothers should and should not be doing, A, for themselves, and B, for their children. And I was a number one victim of that. I kept thinking I have to do this for the kids, this for the kids, and this for the kids. And at some point it just got overwhelming and there was no longer a me. And because I wasn't the best version of me, I wasn't the best mom I could be to them. So shame and guilt was a very big part of my journey. And one obstacle and one shameful and guilty feeling at a time is how to get past this. So I'm happy to answer any questions our guests may have. And I think next is Tracy Osborne.
Okay, Paulina, your website?
Oh, PollyannaLaura.com. It's very unique. It's very special, but it's just my name.com.
Thank you. Okay. Tracy.
Hi, everybody. I am Tracy Osborne. I am a certified trauma recovery coach and certified cognitive behavior therapy coach practitioner. That's a mouthful. I am also the founder of Trauma Release Coaching, which is my company. I work with women survivors of domestic abuse and sexual assault and help them to move past their past so they can create a life they can cherish. I am the host of Releasing Trauma Podcast, which is a survivors podcast, bringing trauma experts and survivors to our listeners so that they are reminded that they are not alone. My website is traumareleasecoaching.com.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Okay, Lauren, you're on.
Hi, I'm Lauren Carlson, and I am the author of books on consent for kids and how to relate parents or relay to parents what it is that a victim is needing, because a lot of times there's a gap between what a victim needs and what a parent knows how to give if that parent is not a victim themselves. So I have written workbooks on how to talk about consent to children. My journey to live without shame comes as I am a victim of rape. And as my virginity was stolen from me, all of my adult life has been factoring or coming from the fact that I was unconscious when it happened, so I had zero answers. And all that did for me was I fell into the trap that so many victims do, and they blame themselves because there were no other answers. All I knew was my part of it. So it really changed who I was as a person, and I was afraid to admit that. I didn't want people to know me as a rape victim. I didn't want people to know that I was still hurting from it. 10 years later, why, I'm a strong woman. Why would that still bother me? So I didn't talk about it. My husband knew, but we didn't discuss it. And I can tell you the day that I felt it was more than a decade after it happened, and I felt as if I was constantly carrying this. I describe it as a dark cloak. It's heavy and it was uncomfortable, and I carried it everywhere, and it kept me from really connecting to people, but also just being myself because I thought these things about me. And I remember the day I heard something on the radio, and I just got out of the car, and it was as if I had just taken that cloak off, and nothing about the event actually changed. All that changed was my perception of it and my perception of me based off of what happened. And through my work, figuring out how I can make something, I hate the phrase, I want to make something positive out of it. It makes me cringe. I don't enjoy that. But using what I know to then connect parents and children so that we can help prevent these things or help make it a little easier for a victim if this has happened. So my website is imperfectlybold.com, and I have a children's book called My Body is My Own, which is just the beginning of talking about boundaries and telling little boys and girls that it's okay to have their own opinion and to say no.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm going to follow Lauren because she brought up something very, very specific. And it's interesting that everyone that I've helped with shame guilt work has the same type of experience. Lauren experienced it as a black coat. When I work with people, we talk with the emotions, and the emotions inside of us, like depression, anxiety, fear, anger, have the shame inside of them. They hold it for us so we can continue our journey. And it's also seen as black spots, black parts of their arm or leg, a black coat, a black blanket. And nobody has corresponded with each other. It's just that independently, 100% of the people find it is a dark blanket, a covering. And this leads me to my take on shame and guilt is that I see shame and guilt as an energy. And it's a black, negative, destructive energy that enters us, and it turns our positive emotions into negative ones. Like compassion turns to depression. Intuition turns to anxiety, and our passion turns to anger. So I'm on the way of releasing the shame guilt and not so much worrying about the depression, anxiety, because once we get rid of the shame guilt, our emotions automatically turn back to the positive side. So I am making a film right now to show how the black, dark shame blanket is upon us and how we can get rid of it. It's not part of us, but we feel the emotions that it makes. Anyway, that's my story. And I would like to, since we have no questions, I would like to carry on from Lauren how you help your clients. What particular aspect do you have that helps you to deal with their trauma or their work-life balance? What particular tools do you use to get at this shame, guilt, and actually take it out of our system, which is a way different approach than mainstream media, because mainstream media says we need guilt to be moral. We need shame. No, we don't. We are moral. God made us moral. We're beautiful humans. Okay, Monica, what do you have for us?
Would you like me or Lauren?
No, Lauren already said she has the books and stuff. And Monica, I'm sure you have things that you specifically talk to your clients about, because we're all different. And,
yes, absolutely.
Which is
Absolutely.
wonderful, there's going to be no copycatting here. You know, we each have tackled shame, guilt at another aspect. Think of the big pie, shame, guilt pie, and you have one slice and she has one slice. It's so massive. Our whole love makes the world go around. Shame, guilt, energy stops the world. Okay.
And I'm going to stop ordering that piece of pie. I'm going to give it right back.
Exactly.
So how I work often, like I look at the fact that as women, we're often taught to disembody at a very early age. I would like to first kind of talk about the fact that we all experience kind of everyday trauma. And then there's also the exquisite trauma, like what Lauren was explaining and experiencing. And so in order for us to actually experience our emotions, we first have to trust ourselves and allow ourselves to kind of come back into our body. And for some of us, that is a very tall order, especially if you have experienced that kind of trauma. So a lot of times when I'm working with women, there's often a gentle invitation, but always trusting that she knows exactly what she needs. She has her own answers. So as a coach and as a facilitator of this work, what I'm often doing is co-creating the ability for her to kind of come back to home to herself and to, really start to pay attention to the emotions that have been unresolved. Because when I think about what Lois just explained, there's often almost like you could look at it, I call it like a forgetting or almost like an energetic dismembering that happens. And in order for us to really kind of come back home to who we are, we have to remember who we were before the world got its hands on us, sometimes physically, right? And otherwise emotionally. There are all kinds of different ways that we've been taught that our body is not a safe place to be, especially as women. And as mothers, it's incredibly important for us to do this work because, of course, we have to nurture ourselves first, because then we are the ones who are nurturing our children. And so to do that healing work and to foster that trust again within ourselves, it really starts to allow us to heal those wounds that are also generational wounds that often kind of come through us without us even realizing or wanting that to happen. So it's very, very important that we kind of start to pay attention to actually our emotions have a lot of wisdom. And when we're ready to feel them and can trust ourselves to do so, that is part of the healing journey.
Yeah, Monica, I want to elaborate on your talk, because unless we feel good enough to release the shame and guilt, we'll never do it. So we have to feel good about ourselves. That's why I named my film I'm Good. And I said I'm good for many, many, many times in my life. I'm getting an echo too. So I think, Monica, what you're saying, you can't release the shame and guilt because you don't feel worthy enough to release it. And I think I have worked with a lot of people in that state because, you would have done it. But you're so much entrenched in the negativity that you can't see how the negativity is not you. You have to see yourself as beautiful, positive, wonderful human female before you can get rid of the ugly, silly, distortive, negative shame, guilt.
Yeah, and I love what you're pointing to because it really falls into this realm of self-approval, and
Yes.
so I'd actually love to hear what Tracy has to say on the subject.
Okay, Tracy. There you go.
Wow. So, one of the things trauma survivors tend to do is hang on to our past. And part of our past is that shame and guilt. If we're in a domestic abuse situation, we are told repeatedly, it's our fault. It's our fault. I didn't want to hurt you, but you made me do it. If we're in a sexual assault situation, again, we have that, well, maybe if I had done this, if I had done that, I wouldn't have been assaulted. Well, we hang on to that and it becomes ingrained into our brains. It becomes part of our cellular makeup. And we have to let go of that past in order to let go of those emotions. We have to stop holding on to the past, stop playing the what if game, uncover our limiting beliefs, and start changing those into a more positive. And as we do that, and we start to forgive ourselves, that shame and guilt will eventually start to go away.
Love that. I want to kind of elaborate a little bit on that, Tracy, too, because I love how you went to self-forgiveness and self-compassion. Oftentimes, I think, again, to go back to this kind of the way that we've been trained, the last person that we're trained to kind of love on is ourselves. And, again, as women, we're taught to give and overgive in a way that we don't have anything left sometimes in our own cup. And what I often work with women around is like, fill your own cup first and then give from your overflow. Now, I understand we cannot always do that, but when we can start to notice where we are abandoning ourselves, I call it abandoning ourselves. It's the moment where something happens, right? And I'll give you an example. I once had, when I was on my early in on my healing journey, I went to see a shaman, and the shaman said to me, Monica, no matter what we do here today, what I really want to know is, do you speak to your loved ones the same way that you speak to yourself? And I didn't really know what he meant at that moment. I thought to myself, oh, he's insinuating that I speak poorly to myself. Now, it wasn't until 2 days later, okay, that I was walking with a bag of groceries, and the bottom, the milk had leaked and like it bottomed out in the parking lot, and all of these cars are coming. And then suddenly I heard the voice right inside. And of course, we all have multiple voices inside of ourselves because those are those inner critics. And when we're kind of embarrassed or in shame, they come out like a big gang in a bad neighborhood, right? Like this is not a comfortable situation, but the voices were, relentless. And it could be as simple as, oh, you're so stupid, pick it up. Like, can't you do anything right? Like hearing the voices and starting to actually recognize those voices as being voices that were created for our own survival, but as adult women, they're no longer needed. And to start noticing and intercepting those voices and to alchemize those voices into voices of kindness, voices of approval, voices that come in and intercept and almost stand there like a best friend would and say, you know, she's doing her best, right? She's amazing. She's good, right? And to start really, whenever I was noticing that I was seeking out there, I would almost like energetically bring my hands to my heart and pull it back in to mirror that self-approval here first. So I hope that makes sense. But that's one of the ways that I work with shame and guilt is first thing is noticing that inner voice.
Monica,
Thank you, Monica.
If I could touch on that, what your shaman said right now, I'm very visual. So I was seeing a child holding the bag of groceries. And if the bag of groceries let out, you would probably tell a loved one or your sister, your mother, your husband, whoever your loved one is, honey, that's okay.
It's don't cry over spilt milk, right?
Right. You know, honey, that's okay. Let me help you. It must have been the way the cashier bagged it, but you would have not imposed that guilt or that negativity or that judgment on your loved one. But it's so natural for us to do that to ourselves. Like, oh, I'm so stupid, or I tried to carry too many things at one time, or I overstuffed the bag. But I find it very interesting and enlightening to first think, would I say this to my loved one? Would I yell at my son if the bag of groceries let out? Of course I wouldn't. You know, I would shift the blame and the negativity onto the cashier, the stupid company that made the plastic bottle that's housing the milk, like every other extension of blame except to my loved one. But when it comes to us, I'm like, I'm the first one. It's my fault. I shouldn't have bought that big of a gallon, or, you know, fill in the excuses of why that is my fault. So I find that very inspiring to have that kind of record in the back of my mind saying, Pollyanna, would you talk like that to your loved one? And I guarantee you that I would not. I'd be much kinder and loving and empathetic and supportive of everybody else except me.
Totally.
So
I've lost the visual on Monica and Lauren. Are you guys okay? Okay, you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can see you.
I wanted to say what Monica said about how before the world gets to us, that is something that I hold very dear to my work, because I like to think of your child. You're given a child, and you know, they come out and they're so nice and they still like you, and then it comes later, you know, all those things are going to change. And I truly believe that we have those couple of years where we can really teach these children how to do all those things that we wish we knew. Because a lot of times, and especially with women, I do a lot of work about male victims and how their trauma is so different. But women and girls are taught you're supposed to be nice. And if a man hits on you, or if a man buys you drink, then maybe you owe him something. And a lot of my belief is that women, especially because we are told we are the peacemakers, we are the hostess types in any type of situation. You're supposed to be nice, and we feel ashamed to have our own opinion and to say no. So even though in so many situations maybe someone didn't exactly say no, it was because they felt ashamed or felt guilty that a man was showing them some kind of interest, and she didn't like it. So what you said, when, you know, before a child gets to us, this is when I believe if you teach a child how to say, oh, I don't really want to play that way. See, I believe that that's a conversation on consent. And now you have just taught your child consent, and you've never talked about sex. And to me, that's what my work is. I am teaching children to be empowered. They're allowed to have their own opinions, and they're allowed to say no. And then also, we're teaching children to respect the opinions of other people and not to be ashamed of that. Because how many women have gone out and said yes to something that they didn't even want to say yes to. And because they were ashamed to have an opinion. They didn't believe that their opinion mattered. And if we can take 5-year-olds and teach them, you know what, if your friend keeps knocking down your blocks, you don't have to play with them. See, to me, I feel like you are empowering children to know what it is that they want, how to verbalize it, and then also how to understand when other people are saying, nah, I don't feel like doing that. And to me, those all come from a shameful, I feel bad that I don't want to do that thing that you want to do. And it seeps into sexual relationships and romantic relationships and work environments and all of those things, especially for women, because we are the pleasers. We are taught that our opinion is not as important, and you shouldn't have that opinion because my opinion's this. So for me, all of it, if you let go of that shame and you show your child, I'm allowed to say, I don't feel like going there for no reason. You don't have to. Then you're teaching your child they're allowed to say, nah, you know what? I don't feel like hugging you. And that to me is so empowering, and I love it. And it all comes from us not being ashamed that we have an opinion.
Lauren, I want to, I love the expression, no is a full sentence.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And yes. And also what you're pointing to as well is this idea of, as parents, we get to make mistakes and we get to apologize for our mistakes. We get to be transparent about the fact that we don't have it all handled. So part of this is also messy, what I call messy work. And it's like reminding yourself to say yes to the mess. Because sometimes in order to break these generational habits, we kind of have to catch ourselves in the act of kind of like, business as usual with parenting our kids. Even with our best intentions, sometimes we're pulling that forward. And what we really want to do is disrupt it.
Right. So like, I can just think, just you saying that, I thought of an example of a couple of weeks ago, I was in the car. I have 3 young children, they're 10 and under, and the car can be very loud. And I was just, and we were getting home and everyone, what can I do? What can I eat? What can I do? Oh my goodness. And I snapped and was just like, no one talk. And then everyone's like, oh my goodness. And inside they're thinking, what did I do? And I knew that. And I said, we were, oh my goodness, I could have just gone through with it. You guys are being loud and you asked too many questions. And I said, I'm sorry. I'm having a lot of anxiety about all these other things, and it's not you. And the 4-year-old doesn't have any idea what that means. The 10-year-old gets out of the car and he said, sorry, you had a bad day. And instead of just doubling down and saying, no, it's because of you or whatever. No, I yelled because I couldn't handle it. But I love being able to show that to a child. And especially my son, I feel that it's extra important to be able to show him, this is what an adult can do. And you grow up, and if you get married, this is what you will say to your spouse. I'm sorry, this is not about you. And I'm no longer ashamed to admit to these very small people of mine that I know I'm just having anxiety, or whatever it is. There's a lot of, it's an adult thing or a grown-up thing, whatever. But
it's
I love
human thing. Yeah.
Right.
It's a human thing.
But I don't feel bad. And I feel like being able to be vulnerable with allowing my children to know, no, there's so many things going on and it's not you. I feel such a better connection. And that is something that 3 years ago, before I put down all of my shame, I could have piggybacked on all of that. No, I'm not worth it. I don't deserve to do this. And I think it's important, show those sides. And I'm not afraid. No, I had an anxiety high day. Okay, that's it.
I'm human. Oh, well.
Right, yeah. Right. I have 3 kids and they're loud.
Yeah. Lauren, you bring up a good point about defending your position.
Right.
The more excuses you bring to a situation, the more shame, guilt you are inviting to yourself. Like, I'm so sorry I'm late. The car broke down. The kid had a messy diaper. You know,
Right.
you can go on and on and on, but that's shameful. What you could say to the person, thank you so much for waiting for me. Never, never explain unless it's necessary. Explaining is what we women tend to do. We're always defending our position. Just say
Lois,
no.
I think
There's another good one.
that ties directly into shame and guilt. We're ashamed
Yes.
that our car broke down. We feel guilty that we
Yes.
have three
Yes.
kids.
You don't
screaming and having them-
advertise the shame guilt that's out there, and never say my shame. You do not own shame and you don't own guilt. It's the shame, the guilt. And we never say, oh, it's such a shame that it's raining, I can't have the barbecue. No, it's sad. It's unfortunate, but we can't invite shame guilt into our lives. We got to kick it out.
Right. And if Lois, I can add on to one thing, and I think Lauren touched on it too. There's a lot of guilt and shame as working moms in the workplace.
Oh, huge. Yeah.
With that tremendously. When I have two kids, they're 26 months apart, and there were times, things just happen. Somebody fell at preschool and they had an egg-sized bump on her forehead. It was my son, and I was freaking out.
Of course.
I didn't know what to tell my boss, who was a father of 5, but because he was a man, he wasn't
taking care of them.
Well, and preschool didn't call him. They called his wife, his mother. Right. And I remember literally the anxiety, like in the cartoons when the character gets red and smoke comes out of their ears. I still remember that feeling of how am I going to tell my boss I need to go because my kid fell and has a huge egg-shaped bump on, under the skin. And he was like 2. So a lot of this was, was new to me, but that guilt that I have to go and tell my boss, my kid needs me. And it was an emergency. It wasn't like, oh, he's crying, I need to go. This was, I may need to take him to see his doctor, 911. That guilt was overwhelming. But I think I dealt with that almost on a daily basis until I realized, you know what? I'm a mom. I have kids. They're going to have needs. Absolutely. And not to the point where I'm going to neglect my employer, my clients, my profession, but I'm capable of doing it both without melting inside and having a complete breakdown. But there's a lot of guilt also in the workplace. And I just wanted to highlight that because I think Lauren mentioned it too about, feeling shame and guilt at work, but it's not just us in our living rooms or in our car. It's what is your boss going to say? What is your male coworker going to say? And back to what Lois was saying, I was like, you know what? I told my boss, I have to take care of something. I will be back in an hour. And that was it. Because I didn't open the door to, please make me feel worse. Please make me feel shame. Please make me feel even more guilt and more anxiety, because I may end up having to be at my pediatrician's office, God forbid if it's serious, and they didn't need to know. So back to explaining, somebody once said explaining is losing. And I've always remembered that. And so they don't need an explanation because I already have shame and guilt in me. I don't need somebody to multiply that because, I think shame and guilt in the workplace is very real too.
Now, when someone does the shaming, we all know how that comes across. I have a couple sentences that we can use to be neutral. That's an interesting approach. See, it's neutral. Someone says, oh, you did that wrong, or you're stupid or dumb, or like, couldn't you file that into the correct name? And you go, that's an interesting statement. You got to give a statement back or you accept it. So when you say that's an interesting approach, you go, you're throwing the shame, guilt, energy back onto them. Another one is,
I love that.
You are very creative.
Thank you for creatively telling me I'm an idiot, but thank you.
I have to leave now. The soup's boiling.
Oh my gosh.
Now, if you're like a husband-wife situation or if your best friend, you can say, what are you saying? So they have to admit they're freaking whatever. What are you saying? Yeah. Can you say that another way? That's what I've used for the kids. Hey, sweetie, can you say that another way, honey? Oh, okay. You'll get more lollipops that way, you know.
I love using the term the sacred and, because I do think that oftentimes it's about giving ourselves permission to be both divine and human. I often say that, we call it the human mess, right? Humanness, human mess. But unfortunately, when we negate our human side, we also negate our divine side. And I love the fact that, like, as a fully embodied whole woman, I get to be messy and magnificent, right? That it doesn't have to look like you were saying, Pollyanna, about, having to negate one side of yourself in order to honor the other, that actually both, it all gets to belong, right? And so I think when we're noticing ourselves again falling victim or into shame and guilt, it's that, again, that hand on the heart, right? That intercepting or using those ways to kind of get rid of it, as Lois was saying, and kind of like, nope, not welcome here, right? But to continually
that's another good thing to say. Not welcomed here. I like
welcome
that.
here. But I also love also pointing to here are boundaries. I'd love to hear what Tracy has to say more on boundaries, but like I think about boundaries not only energetically, right, but like our words. And I often think of like a birthday candle. You know how we hold our hands in front of a birthday candle when we're walking to the table? And what we have to recognize is that we owe it to ourselves to hold that hand in front of our heart if we're in a situation where somebody's wanting to blow that light out inside of us. And so it really is beholden to us to really start noticing, where does my energy get, where does my light get blown out, in whose presence, and then to really start creating and practicing boundaries. So Tracy, I know you have a lot to say on this.
Boundaries are crucial, and not only are they important to make and to have, but they are more important to uphold. We can make boundaries all day long, but if we don't uphold them and we let people walk all over our boundaries and, just crush right through them, then we're just letting them walk all over us. Mm-hmm. And so, that's one of the things that I teach my clients is that, not only do you have to create these boundaries, but you have to stick to them. These are important. These are your protectors. This is how you protect yourself. And so boundaries are, it could be just something simple, like you can't speak to me in that tone of voice. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to allow you to speak to me in that tone of voice. I am not going to allow you in my bubble, right? Back up, get out of my bubble. So boundaries are just something that without them, we just tend to walk aimlessly, I think, and just let life happen to us without having some kind of a protective shell around us. And those are our boundaries. And I love how we have said before, no is a complete sentence. You don't have to explain why. My kids are famous for, well, no. Why? Because I said no. That's it. No. They love that game, and I'm like, no, we're not going there. And word choices are very powerful. So we were touching on having to, not having to explain things or apologize. And I learned a while ago, instead of apologizing, I'm sorry I'm late. Thank you for waiting for me.
Yeah.
And it reinforces ourselves. It reinforces our boundaries of not having to explain ourselves. It allows us to not feel shame and guilt. So I'm sorry means I've done something wrong. Whereas thank you puts it, kind of back on them and makes it more empowering for both of you. And
Exactly.
I kind of digressed from boundaries there a little bit, but that was some stuff that I was wanting
that's
to
a boundary.
Yeah.
No, that's a boundary.
Some stuff I was wanting to get out there.
Tracy, as you were speaking, I'm already thinking, I remember feeling shame and guilt about setting boundaries.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
I'm completely sincere. I mean, like even something dumb as my children are getting older, they're spending more time doing their own thing. And something very simple is I've just started watching like dumb TV again, because sometimes that's my outlet. Like 30 minutes, I just want to watch a cupcake show or whatever. And they'll come and they'll just grab the remote and change it. And I'm like, am I a ghost? Does nobody see me? And so as far as the boundary setting, I've started saying, child A, did you not notice I was watching something?
Mm-hmm.
But a few years ago, I would have struggled because I don't want to hurt their feelings and I want them to come and sit on the couch with me. But in doing that, I'm not setting a boundary for me. So
Absolutely.
It's like, honey, do you want to spend time with me? Okay, great. I just have to see who wins Cupcake Wars. And in 12 minutes, when my show is over, I'm happy to watch whatever you want. But just me personally, I really struggled with admitting my need and admitting, you know what? I just need 30 minutes to just zone out because I felt guilty. And now I don't feel guilty anymore.
We're supposed to put our kids first.
Correct. But I also got to the point in my life where there was no me, and it became a physical manifestation for me personally. And so setting boundaries and not feeling guilty or shameful about having boundaries is a whole thing in itself. So I just
real quick, I just want to add on that I find that most mothers probably feel that way, where they feel bad anytime they are going to, I think Monica was the one who said it before, or maybe it was Pollyanna, where you feel bad when you took a long shower. You feel bad when you're doing things. When you're doing things for yourself. I have turned it into realizing that I am teaching my child how to be a better human when he or she has a child. So I'm no longer ashamed to have a boundary. I no longer feel guilty to have a boundary. And I actually think that I am doing them good by setting that boundary and showing them it's okay to like yourself and it's okay to say no. I have the exact I don't want to watch Barbie again. No, I don't. But I'm going to finish this. And I would love for you to sit by me, but you don't have to. But I think that I'm actually doing them a service by showing them that no, just because I'm your mother doesn't mean you get to run all over me. And I truly believe that the more your children see you do that, it is exactly the same way as if they see you in an abusive relationship, they will believe that that is normal and that is what a relationship should be.
It's acceptable.
You treating yourself with boundaries and not being ashamed of it. You are showing those children how to be humans when they are then adults and have to set boundaries, and they will be less ashamed because, well, my mom, no, this is how I was taught. And I love that.
Well, and not only that, Lauren, but you're also teaching them to respect people and respect other people's boundaries. So it's a twofer right there.
Right. Well, and to me, that is the bigger part.
Yeah, but also what Lauren is saying, you're also teaching them to have boundaries for themselves.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So they will grow
that
up and respect themselves, also know how to respect others, and also know that someone needs to respect them. So you are setting them up for finding, loving relationships or friend relationships or work environments where they are respected. And you're showing that all by saying, nope, I'm going to watch cupcakes.
One thing I would love to share is when I discovered in my 40s that I was in an abusive relationship, I recognized I didn't know that there was such a thing as emotional abuse. And of course, Lois, you've shared with us that you had experienced as well, right? Like there's been a way that I think we've all experienced trauma, and there's different kinds of trauma. There's physical abuse. There's people stepping on our values, our boundaries, emotional abuse, etc. And one of the things this brings up for me is the fact that when I really started to unpack what emotional abuse was, I recognized that it's like a tiny 1,000 paper cuts, right? Like it happens over time. Like it's not about blaming yourself, but once you can recognize it and now it's time for me to take responsibility and to start take care of myself. And something that was really powerful, and I'd love to invite anybody who's listening to this to do, is to sit down and write your own Bill of Rights. Because when you start actually saying to yourself, like, I have the right to make mistakes. I have the right to ask for what I need. I have the right to say yes when I mean yes and no when I mean no. I have the right to fire myself from a job that's just a job. I have the right to want more. I have the right to shine brightly. I have the right to have my kid not take the remote and change the channel, right? Like to assert these rights, to remind ourselves and also invite our children to really sit down and think about what their needs are, right? And to have them assert their rights, because I think the more clear we get about like what we have the right to need as emotional, spiritual human beings, then we get to kind of really have a discussion and a discourse about it that starts revealing so much about what and more intimacy, which is I think what we all want with our kids, right? And others.
I would like to now, if you had one thing for people to take home today, because it's nearing almost the end, what would you say to them that's simple and they could use today? Monica, is it the Bill of Rights?
Yes, I would say the Bill of Rights for sure. I would encourage everybody to sit down and really write yourself a Bill of Rights and hang it up in your house.
And you have an example on your website, correct?
I do. Yes, you're welcome to download it for sure and use it as a model for your own.
Tracy, what would you say for someone to take home today that they can use that you found to be very effective?
For me, it's reminding people that their trauma, their shame, their guilt, it's not their fault. It's okay to let go. And that, I think the biggest thing is that, whatever it is that you're going through, you're not alone. There's somebody else out there who's been going through almost the exact same thing.
And that's huge, because shame guilt makes us isolated. Yes. Shame guilt puts us in the isolation prison. That's what I call it, the isolation prison. Mm-hmm. And what Tracy has done is brought trauma victims together, and they go, oh my, I'm not alone. And, that is huge, exactly. Tracy. That is so huge, because the biggest thing that traumatized people do, which we all have had trauma. We just live on Earth. That's enough of trauma. So, it's true. We all have PTSD. It just depends on what degree. So bringing people together, Tracy, is so huge. That in itself is making that whole for people to say, I'm not alone. Mm-hmm. That's very important.
Lois, can I just pick up on that as my closing sentence?
Please.
The one thing, as far as I would say primarily to working moms, is there is no shame or guilt in asking for help. I dealt with that for years. I really wear a Wonder Woman costume under my clothes. And if anybody ever got the hint that I needed help, I failed. I was a failure. And so it took years for me to admit the fact, you know what? I'm okay being in a carpool. I'm okay if somebody has to pack their own lunch. It's okay if somebody has to leave practice early to get to dance rehearsals. So my one takeaway is there is no shame or guilt in asking for help because you are not in this alone. And shame, guilt puts us in a dark, lonely corner. And once you're there, it's debilitating and you're not at your best for yourself or your family. Thank you.
Paulina, what was your first person that you asked for help? What was your first thing that you did?
So I'm crazy. I would drive about 25 minutes to give my kids a ride home from school, which was less than 1 mile from home. 1 mile. And
wow.
Because I felt ashamed. I wanted to be the mom in the pickup lane. I wanted the kids to run to my car because all the other kids were running to their parents' car. Or I think it was their parents. I mean, who knew who was getting in whose car? But I asked a girlfriend, I said, hey, if you're going to drive by school, I'm stuck in a mediation. I just can't get out. She's like, are you kidding? Absolutely. It's 1 mile. And it killed me to have to ask her. And the kids were so excited. They call her Auntie. They were so excited. Oh, Auntie so-and-so came to school. I'm like, you guys are happier to see her than you were, to see me in the drive-through lane. What's going on here? And that was step one, just to ask somebody if they could give my kids a ride home from school. And it relieved so much anxiety and stress and guilt. And the kids were thrilled. So that was step one, just ask a friend for a ride. Very simple, but very impactful. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, Lauren, what can you say to us mothers?
So I think that the most important thing that people need to remember, especially moms, is it's okay to feel what you're feeling, and you don't have to be afraid of that. So if you're having a bad day, if you're like me, and there were days where I had PTSD and panic attacks, it's okay. And especially following a trauma, everyone's going to heal in a different way. And people want to say, here's what a normal victim looks like after. No, I didn't do that.
There's no normal victim.
But for people to say, well, why didn't you do this? And why didn't you do that? And you think, oh my goodness, I'm supposed to go to the police instead of going to my final that next day. I'm supposed to feel good about whatever it is you're supposed to. And I fell under shame that I wasn't doing those things. You weren't supposed to want to go to court and tell your story because maybe it would traumatize you more. I didn't have any of those things, and I felt like maybe they thought I wasn't victimized because I wasn't feeling what they thought I was going to be feeling. So everything that I say to myself and to my children, it's okay. It's really okay. And don't fall into the trap of then feeling guilty about your own emotions. And you're allowed to say no. And you're allowed to be sad. My mom used to say, if all you do today was just get up, if that's all you can do, then you did it. Check, you did everything on your list. If that's all you have the ability to do that day, then just do it. Especially during COVID, there were times where that was all I could do. I mean, we were shoved into one kid potty training, 2 kids e-learning, and we had never done it before. And then my husband here working, all 5 of us in, and I couldn't go to the gym, and I could, everyone's in each other's face, but if all you did that day was get up, hey, that was good. That sounds pretty good. So for me, accepting your own feelings and your own emotions and being allowed to, like I said earlier, you're allowed to have panic attacks, you're allowed to have anxiety days, and you're allowed just to be kind of crabby.
And every human being has PTSD. Every human being has PTSD. I would like to leave one thought that's kind of contrary to the general thought, is that we can we heal the deepest when we make friends with our inner critic. Now, the problem is, as our inner critic lives, well, my inner critic lived in 1940, 1950, and I'm living in the year 2021. My inner critic's name is King. And I said to King, because he calls me dumb and stupid and he has to watch me and babysit me. And I said, you're living in the time when I was a kid and didn't know any better. It's the year 2021 and I am now an adult. And he goes, no one ever told me. So instead of fighting with the inner critic, we're eventually going to have to make friends. And then when we make friends, he evolves. When he evolves, we evolve. Now, right now, I have my King going around the ethers trying to find podcast hosts. He doesn't need to babysit me anymore. So he has a job. I gave him a new job because I said, King, would you like more power? And he goes, power? How can I have more power? I said, you can have more power if you don't have to babysit me anymore. Oh, what can I do? I said, you can go around the universe and find me podcast hosts because I'm doing podcasts now. And you don't have to babysit me. You get a job promotion and more vacation. But if you stay with me in this job of shaming and guilting, you're going to be stuck forever and you'll be miserable. And I'm miserable. So when we negotiate a deal, it took a couple of months because he thought I wasn't even worth talking to and gave me trials. Like I would be shamed and guilt and see if I crumbled or I just tell him to flick off. So eventually when you pass the test, he evolves and then you evolve.
I love that, Lois. It's like finding your own way, your own strategy, something that works for you to work with those inner critics. So I love that.
Yeah, and some people have more than one, and that's harder. I only had one, and it was a male. If you have a female critic, it's much harder. And I worked with some client that had 3 inner critics, and we took a few months. But anyway, we all became friends and, well, negotiate. We negotiate. So my inner critic's my best friend at this point in time, but it took some time. So I would like to leave that possibility open.
I love that. Very good. Well, thank you, ladies. This has just been such an enriching conversation.
I think we did an awesome job, and we're going to get a recording, and who knows, we may just keep showing it off.
Great. I would like to keep in touch with all of you, and I will reach out separately. And it's been an absolute pleasure meeting you and hearing all of your stories.
Likewise.
Yes.
I haven't received any notes, but shame guilt is not popular at this point, but it's so common people don't know they have it. And that's where the education comes in. People don't know they need us. We have to educate them to know that they need us.
They all need us.
Blessings to everyone. Thank you so much. And let's do keep in touch.
Take care. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.